Wow, what a reception.
What
And
a
here on Earth
reception.
Day, it's such a treat to have you here, Jane. How are you? How have you been? Good?
Busy, busy, busy.
So
Busy,
busy.
busy, busy.
She is amazing. So you are 80 years old. You travel 300 days out of the year. Can I just say, that's extraordinary. How do you have the energy to do everything you're doing?
Because there's so much to do, and I feel it's so important to do it, and I take it one day at a time.
One day at a time.
Yeah.
You know, meanwhile, I want to talk about what inspired you. I know you grew up in a place called Bournemouth, England, and in a place called the Birches. Tell us about your childhood and what ignited this passion for the environment and for animals in you.
Well, in fact, I think I was born with it. I was born loving animals, and I had a very wonderfully supportive mother. Mum and my sister and I went to live with her mother, and there was this lovely garden with trees, and I used to climb the trees, and there were birds, and I watched them make their nests. So that was the perfect setting.
And also you had a dog growing up that was very, very influential.
My dog, Rusty, was part of my childhood and taught me so much about animals, yes.
I think a lot of parents will want to know, what was it that your mom did that unleashed this and really encouraged this natural curiosity you had?
I think it was when we went to stay at a farm for a holiday. We lived in London at that time, and we went onto this farm, all these animals close up. It was exciting, I remember it. I was 4.5. And I disappeared one afternoon. They couldn't find me. They even called the police. And I had been for 4 hours approximately hiding in a hen house to see how a hen laid an egg. And when my mother...
And you were just 4.5?
I was just 4.5. I mean, you know, here's the egg. Where's the hole big enough?
Yeah.
I couldn't see one.
How did she do that? Yes, we've been asking that question ever since,
Yeah.
right?
So anyway, my mother saw me rushing towards the house, all excited, you know. She could so easily have said, "How dare you go off without telling us? Don't you know how worried we've been? Don't do it again." It would have killed all the excitement. But she sat down to hear this wonderful story, and that was the sort of mother she was.
When you were 23, I know you went to Africa, and a very special person took you under his wing.
23, I went to stay with a school friend. I got the money working as a waitress until I'd saved up enough. Heard about the late Louis Leakey. Somebody said, "Oh, you should meet him if you're interested in animals." And I went to see him just to talk about animals. And I came away with a job as his secretary. And that led to him offering me the opportunity of going to learn about not just any animal, but the one closest to us, the chimpanzee.
And before we talk about that, tell me a little bit about Louis Leakey. What was he like?
He was far ahead of his time. And today it's normal that you go and study animals to learn something about prehistory. He spent his life searching for the fossils of early humans. And he felt, you know, maybe if there's behavior the same in chimps today and humans today, we had a common ancestor, and we brought these behaviors with us through our long evolutionary separate pathways.
So he dispatched you to Tanzania to really work with chimpanzees, and I imagine you had had very little exposure to chimpanzees, and,
None.
and they to you.
None. None.
So what was that like for your first encounter and trying to actually ingratiate yourself in this very different world?
A world of forest that I dreamed of as a child after falling in love with Tarzan. And now here I was in my dream world, but the big problem was that the chimpanzees would take one look and run away. And, you know, I knew that if something exciting didn't happen before the money ran out, that would be the end. But eventually, thanks to one chimpanzee, David Greybeard.
And thanks to a lot of bananas too, right, Jane?
Well, to start with, we didn't have the bananas to begin with. It was just David Greybeard getting used to me. And then he's the one who found the bananas from my tent and stole them.
And so you got to, it must have been so fascinating to just observe. I know you learned a tremendous amount, and one of the things you learned is how chimpanzees behave when they're excited.
Yeah, well, if there's a sudden food and they're anticipating getting the food, you'll have to stand up and I'll show you.
Okay.
You know, so I mean, we're really excited, and so we go, and we're too excited to eat.
Yeah?
So we, and then we pat each other. I make people do that at a stuffy dinner when the food's makes everybody relax.
But do they jump up and down? They do more than just kind of pat you, right? That was very good. I think they want more, Jane. Do they jump up and down and flail their arms, or they just kind of...
No, because the next thing they do is grab the food. But, you know, when the males are socially excited, they do these dramatic charging displays and grab branches and drag them, throw rocks, and bristle their hair. And it's their way of intimidating rivals without fighting.
Well, I know that a number of significant life events happened to you in the jungles where you were observing the chimps. You met your first husband, a Dutch filmmaker named Hugo. You had a son you nicknamed Grub, and you made some very profound discoveries. And this is from a National Geographic documentary called Jane Goodall, My Life with Chimpanzees. Why was this such an important discovery, Jane?
Well, it wasn't only just using the twig. It was picking a leafy twig and stripping the leaves, which was modifying that twig. And up until that point, it was thought that humans and only humans used and made tools. We were man the tool maker. And that was the observation that brought in the National Geographic, and funding was then assured.
You also learned about the maternal instincts of chimpanzees from a chimp named Flo.
Yeah, well, Flo was one of the many, but Flo was a very amazing mother. She was the matriarch. She was quite old when I first knew her, teeth worn to the gums. But she nevertheless was a fantastic mother. That's her last infant, Flint. And she was fearless in defense of any of her offspring. And from her, I learned that the bonds between mother and offspring can last through life. So even with her adult son, there was still this very close, supportive bond.
Conversely, though, you learned about the dark side of chimpanzees.
Sadly, like us, they have this aggressive, brutal behavior, even a kind of primitive war. So, you know, like us, on the one hand, they can be horrible, but they also show love, compassion, and altruism, like us.
Well, I know that all your work with chimpanzees has made you realize that their habitat is being endangered. You've made that your new mission, protecting that habitat.